This is ContactTalkRadio.com. Consciousness in action. And you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Ping.fm, and Upsnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio.
Welcome to HR and Career with AldeenST. Aldeen is a passionate human resource professional and career coach on a mission to explore and find best practices in HR and career development. Join AldeenST and her guests to explore the complexities of human resources and career development. This is HR and Career with AldeenST.
Welcome to HR and Career with AldeenST. I am your host, AldeenST. Today I'm joined by not one, but two guests, and they are from Career Place. I've got Gabe, Gurman, and Melissa Dobbins, and they'll be talking to us today and sharing in the conversation on recruitment bias control. Welcome, Gabe and Melissa.
Thank you. It's Gabe. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome.
Great, he said.
Awesome. Great to have both of you here. And I like the conversation that we're going to be having today about recruitment bias control. I want to kick it off by asking about what are some of the challenges that you have come across while you've talked to organizations about bias?
Ooh, Melissa, you want me to start or you want to start with this one?
Why don't you start?
Oh boy. So where do I begin? So I think it's interesting. I'll share some stories, some very specific stories that I've seen, in the world of recruitment. And things like, and I'm going to start very, very extreme with this first story over here, where I spoke to a recruiter who was responsible for replacing marketing people. And, we talked about the fact that he needs to see pictures of people before he can consider them for a job. And I said, well, why on earth do you need to see a picture of somebody to place them for a job? And he said, well, it's very simple. I need to tell if they're organized or not. I was like, wow, okay, organization skills are very important for a marketing person, of course. But his philosophy, his thinking as a recruiter was that in order to, if they have an organized picture, there must be an organized individual. And if they are, then they're worth his time to speak to. That's probably one of the worst examples that I've seen in talking to people about how they judge people. It has nothing to do with their abilities to determine if they could be applicable for a job. And one other example I'll give from earlier in my career was a fellow hiring manager that I used to work with, and I won't say where, but he had something against veterans. And the reason why is because he was hiring software developers that had to be creative in their job, and he had a stigma. He had his own thinking, I guess, from his own experience, that veterans weren't creative people. So if he saw a resume with someone who was previously in the armed services, he would discount that resume, and that's an awful example. But that was a stigma, again, another a bias that he had in his mind regarding that.
Wow.
And I'm wondering if you have a couple of these experiences as well.
Quite a few. I'll tell you that some of the biases that we come across all the time as we're having conversations, both from the hiring side and the applicant side. Things like ageism is a big one. So when you have people who are looking for jobs, especially if it's not management, they're single contributors, they're excellent at what they do, and they really struggle to find those positions because the first bias that pops up is, well, you're already however many years old, usually over the age of 40, and you didn't make it into management, something must be wrong with you.
That's right.
But if you take a step back and you think about it, we would never take an amazing writer and say, hey, you just turned 40, so you're going to be an editor now? And they're not allowed to write anymore? It makes no sense, but this is what we do every day in these disciplines. So that comes up a lot. There's so many. The women in engineering comes up a lot, and there's a lot of great excuses. Like, there are no women here. And that one is pretty common.
I really like those examples that you guys have been sharing, because I've come across that too. And I mean, like you said a while ago, Melissa, you kind of go, oh my goodness, I can't believe it's 2018 and people are still doing that. But I think at this point I want to distinguish between being biased and discriminatory, because I know a lot of people may be listening, and saying, you know what, But those are discriminating factors. But there is a little bit of a difference between discriminating against a candidate and being biased to a candidate. So I'm going to leave that one open. Who wants to go after that one first?
Go ahead, Melissa.
So I'll jump in on this one. It's one of my big passion points because I like to give people the benefit of the doubt. I truly believe most people out there are doing the best they can to make all the right decisions. Most of us are driven to wrong decisions by bias in this arena. And what I distinguish the difference is biases are pieces of information that can be proven wrong. Right. So if I have a bias against women in engineering and I meet an excellent woman engineer, that is something I can easily internalize and see that at least there's an exception to the rule, and then that rule starts to degrade.
Right.
If there's prejudice involved, if it's discrimination, then I'm going to come up with an excuse to explain away this exception. Well, it's not actually her. Other people must be doing the work for her.
Right.
So I think the big difference there is biases can be degraded because they can be proven wrong versus discrimination, which is much more embedded, but I think it's also rarer for a lot of people.
Right. I love the distinction that you made there, Melissa, and I think a lot of professionals will appreciate that distinction because biases quite often, if not almost 100% of the time, can be proven wrong. Just using your female engineer example, a lot of people, like you said, they'd say, oh, it's not her doing the work, she's got a good team under her, you know, somebody's covering for her. But when you find that exception where she's really good, you know, it's at that point that the discrimination, I think, would come in. Like you said, you know.
Right. And what's really great about that is that biases can be overcome. It takes time. It takes a lot of people standing up to be the exception to the rules in order to degrade those biases, but it happens. And that is something that's worth all of our attention and time because as we degrade those, we come up with better and better inclusionary environments. Isn't that what we all want?
And I love it when people can be proved wrong, right? The whole notion of, wow, you know, if they take any one of those examples, and when someone comes to the realization, this is how you know it's a bias, and they say, wow, I never knew that. I never knew a woman could be an engineer. I never knew a veteran could actually be creative and those types of things. Or, you know, that's the cool things when you see that reaction as well.
Awesome. And I think you've really created an opportunity here to talk about some of the common biases that you've seen in the hiring process. And I'm going to go a little bit more on the educational side. So, for example, that confirmation bias, where people create a hypothesis in their mind and look for ways to prove it. How do you assist or how do you recommend companies or professionals try to, you know, rule that out of their hiring process?
Well, I think a lot of those biases can come in when there isn't a clear goal in mind. So, and I'm going to throw out a term that gets used all the time when things are a little iffy. I'll know it when I see it. And that I know it when I'll see it gets us into a lot of trouble. And we use that a lot with, let's say, looking at resumes to find that perfect person. But if we take a step back and instead say, this is what I want, and go through that process of objectively defining what success is for the position you're hiring for, the chances that you'll start seeping in biases, it starts to greatly diminish because you've set that goal line and now everyone can be compared to that goal. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And like you said, I'll know it when I see it. I find a lot of smaller companies, and I'm going to say smaller companies because you've got a lot of people wearing a lot of hats, much more so than you would in even a larger company, is that now they're going, I'll know it when I see it. I know what I'm looking for. When I find it, I will know that person. They don't spend the time to actually create a process that is objective. Something that they can measure other candidates against. Even, I mean, the simplicity of creating standard questions that you ask all candidates, a lot of people don't do that. A lot of companies, you know, the hiring manager is the plant manager, or it's the operations manager, or it's the marketing manager. And they all, if they're all in the same organization, or maybe that one person wears the two hats, they don't have the time or the resources to create a structured review or a structured list of questions that they want to ask all candidates. So right away, they'll ask some questions, they'll get some really great information in 1 or 2 interviews, and then the others, it's more unstructured, and if they don't see it, so to speak, they might not ask some more probing questions to kind of get that information from the candidate. So that's a very good
And what often happens when you go into this realm of winging it, in that phone interview or any of these other interactions, is you start testing the person that you're thinking of hiring the same way you would a potential friend or anybody else in your social interactions. And you start swinging towards this, would I want to hang out with you? Would I want to have a beer or coffee with you? And that, again, will move us in the wrong direction.
That's
because
right.
when that starts seeping in, you're looking for commonalities, and any individual who doesn't have them, they root for the wrong football team, for example,
right,
will be at a disadvantage. And anyone who doesn't feel and sound like you, that doesn't end up in your comfort zone, will be at a different disadvantage. And of course, if you flip that over, if you're not hiring people who do not feel and think like you, then you're going against the concept of diversity, right? You're hiring people who are just like you, and that's not necessarily the best hire for your company or your team.
That's right. And I like the fact that you hit on that too, Melissa. You're hiring people that look like you and the diversity agenda, because diversity and inclusion right now, I'm not going to say it's a hot topic, because I think it always should be a hot topic, just because of the value that diversity brings to an organization. But, just being conscious that you are depleting your ability to innovate and create and achieve a diverse team because you're looking for someone so much like you is a really important point there.
Yeah, Gabe and I get along.
No.
Go ahead, Gabe.
Just one of the points, because I Melissa and I, we're on a mission, and what part of what you described is part of our mission. But, just to answer the question you had is, awareness training is important as well. I don't want to discount that. It's not enough. I'll say right off the bat, it's something that's not enough, but to be aware of these problems, to be aware of the issues of bias. And I love, and actually Melissa did this something once in a presentation where, and I think they do this in a lot of the awareness training classes as well. They'll throw pictures up of these people and say, who's the CEO, who's the doctor, who's the accountant, and so forth. And of course, you'll have mental pictures in your mind, and then they'll show who's really in which positions. And again, what's the purpose of that? Awareness, just to make you give yourselves that little bit of awareness. It doesn't stick. You need to do more than that, but I think awareness is the important step to solving any kind of problem, just to make sure everyone's on the same boat, on the same page, and being aware of the problem.
No, that's so true, Gabe. And I think one of the biggest challenges is just that awareness, because a lot of people don't like to think that they're doing it wrong or they're not doing it effectively. And some of them, because there's no feedback loop, there's not enough time for what I call HR analytics, getting an opportunity to review your hiring process and get feedback from the candidates that are coming through your process. They don't see what's going on or what's not happening. And then I know on another side too, sometimes it's the time and the resources to collect all that data and make sense of it so that it can affect change. Takes time. And for a lot of people, that time is money that they have to spend elsewhere. So I think that's awesome.
To your earlier point, the more you're able to standardize the process, even if it's for a single job, the more you can do comparative analysis. Because those free-form conversations are very hard to compare, and the amount of time it takes to extract information from those versus the same question to all the candidates and then comparing the answers. And it does help a lot with being able to apples compare candidates based on their capabilities, their approach, the way they think, and to be able to pick out the right candidate.
That's true. That's true. There's one practice I heard of recently, Melissa, where what the HR people have done or what the process looks like is that they send a list of questions and they ask the candidates to sit in front of a camera and answer the questions one at a time. And then when they're done, they will listen to the candidate answers. Not necessarily watch the candidates, but just listen to the answers that come back. And I think that's one of the great ways through a standardization. You can listen, technically if you wanted to, you could piece that all together and listen to each question at a time by different candidates. And just by getting that information, you're able to, again, in a standardized way, pick out information, similarities, differences, and identify the candidate who you'd say has superiorly answered that question. You know, as opposed to being, you know, kind of like we were talking about left field, where it's kind of like we have a totally different interview depending on the candidate that walks through the door type of scenario.
Right.
And you could take that a step further and have the people who are listening to the answers and reacting to it record their answers so that you've got an audit trail, you've got proof of what people's reactions were, and create a team to do this, not an individual. So because everyone is biased, and we know that, we have to embrace that about ourselves and not keep fighting it. Instead, we mitigate it. So if my biases are different than your biases, if we both listen and react, then the truth starts coming out somewhere in the middle because we might be counterbalancing each other's unknown biases.
That's true.
So if you make it a group effort, you record the results so that everyone can see them along with the questions, you can start building a much more objective approach.
And I find
Melissa, you dropped a shocker over there. Wait, Melissa dropped a shocker. Everyone is biased.
Yes.
It's a shocker, but it's true.
Yes. It is actually part of our human psychology. There's nothing we can do about it. But being aware and mitigating it makes a ton of difference.
That's so true.
Right.
That's so true. Yeah. I like the fact that you mentioned it's a group there, Melissa, because a lot of people think, okay, the hiring process is just the HR person over here or just the HR team. But by getting everybody involved and being cognizant of the fact that everybody is biased in some kind of a way, and knowing that you're know that you're providing your feedback. So one, people feel more invested in the process because they're only giving their feedback at that point. Getting that across a group of people so that you can manage, I'm going to say, the biases that may, you know, exist across the team, and then using that more objectively to make a decision as opposed to, okay, John Brown over here, the marketing manager, he interviewed 3 or 4 candidates and he thinks this one is the best one. Now we've got, we've got Gabe in here, we've got Melissa, we've got Aldeen, and they're all looking at the same candidate, listening to the same answers, and then they're both giving their feedback. Now we can more objectively choose a candidate because we've had different people with different biases, you know, kind of give their input in there and make it, I think it makes a better selection.
And then if you expand it again with Gabe's point from earlier around training, there's also various trainings that are required for things like, so let's say you're listening to the response. Somebody who comes from a different country where English could be a second language could have an amazing response, but it might not have the same cadence that we're used to. Or someone with a disability, for example, like a hearing disability or autism, could respond in a different cadence. So if you combine that with training on how to recognize and compensate and understand this is not, that person might not sound like you. So let's separate that from the answer itself and evaluate on the answer. And now think about how powerful that tool becomes.
That's right. That's right. I'm almost thinking in my mind now where you have one of those voice changing pieces of equipment where now you can't hear any, accents. You can't hear any, distinctions between the tone or, the variations in the voice there. And now you're just hearing the answer. Or maybe it's just a transcript,
or even just having the training readily available. So it's not something you heard 6 months ago, but it's a 5-minute thing that you can play right before you listen to the responses. Then you're applying it right away, and that's far more effective as well. So you don't necessarily need to solve everything with technology. It's a combination.
I agree. And one of the huge sorry, go ahead. Jump in there, Gabe.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to offer a tip in this discussion we just had about team review and, when you're evaluating candidates, because it's great to have the audit trail and such, but something I recommend is that when you're looking to make a disposition about a candidate, don't allow the team members to share their yay and nay vote in front of each other, because what happens is that sometimes team members would default to what the more senior person would say. Oh, my boss is saying yes. That means I need to say yes as well to this candidate. Okay. Let there be a central person to collect the response and to get the true feel from the team, because it's hopefully you're going to be a diverse team who's reviewing, and let them get the actual true feelings from those folks who are reviewing the candidates.
That's awesome.
But the comments, I think, and the conversation can be shared because there's a lot of additive value to that. Just not the ratings, the yay, nay. I completely agree.
Yes. And I think we're getting right on the cusp of what has become the rise of blind hiring. So I'm going to throw this over to Gabe. Can you walk me through what is blind hiring?
No, it's the whole idea of starting objectively in the hiring process as opposed to starting subjectively in the hiring process. And what we mean by that is, and when you say blind, the way I define blind, I'm really referring to the subjective pieces, which really starts with the resume. And the resume has many components to it that can lead to biases and lead to trigger biases, such as name. You can figure out probably ethnicity from the name. You can look at the schools that the person went to, and you can look at the companies they worked at. You can see the fact there's a gap in the resume. You can see the age, the associations. Maybe there's an LGBT association in there. There's a lot of factors in there that could influence the person looking things over. The whole notion of blind is really flipping the process on its head and focusing on things, and something Melissa touched on earlier on, here you're hiring for a particular position. Focus on what will a winner hire or a very successful hire look like ideally for this position. I mean, if they start thinking about things that way, you can start evaluating the candidate from that perspective without really seeing anything regarding their background, their name, or anything like that. So it's really starting, to really summarize at a very high level, it's starting from the objective, not starting from the subjective.
I like
Melissa,
that.
anything to add?
No. That was a great overview.
I think Gabe gave us I like that tagline. It's starting from the objective and not the subjective. Because when I first heard the term blind hiring, I remember a conversation Gabe and I had earlier this year, and I really like the idea of matching what I'm looking for in terms of competence, skills, and knowledge, matching that to somebody who has demonstrated competence based on a variety of components in the hiring process to determine that competence. And then actually at the end of making sure that those things align for me, then I see the resume. Or then I meet the candidate, because now in my mind, I've already satisfied my requirements. Now it's just a matter of meeting the face behind the requirements, not the name, but meeting the face behind the requirements.
Exactly. And the cool thing that happens with this process is that when you start objectively and you start looking at what really matters for the job and what really matters coming out of the candidate that relates to the job, and then you get to the point of them then seeing who they are, a lot of the biases, the unconscious biases disappear, because now you're going to see, now at the end, you're going to see the person, right? This is the person you're hiring. All those things that you probably have in your mind, you don't even realize you have in your mind, have disappeared because this person's proven themselves, right? They've shown you what they have, which is the cool thing about blind hiring.
That's true. I mean, it's a lot like blind dates, but I think blind hiring definitely takes it up a notch for sure.
That is true.
For sure.
Let's not go there.
We'll keep it on blind hiring and how it's the recruitment process. And
I've had a lot of disasters in the other department.
There we go. All right. So we touched a little bit. We touched a little bit on the training that goes into ensuring that, we identify, we manage, and we reduce the bias in the hiring process. But how have you guys seen our technology being used in reducing the biases? Because we as the humans, we're programming the technology. We're telling it what to look for. We're influencing, so to speak, the technology that we're employing. So how do we, or what have you suggested, to other clients of yours, professionals, as it may be, how do you propose they use the technology to reduce the bias, even with the human element in there?
You want to take it, Melissa?
Sure. So first of all, full disclosure, being biased, our solution is the best.
Yes.
Putting that aside for a moment, you brought up a really good point, I think, around even with what we term as AI in the field, artificial intelligence, there are people behind that creating those algorithms. Some of them are fully bias-laden. Others of them could be pretty good. So in that sense, the first piece of feedback is just know what it is you're evaluating. Understand what's driving it underneath, because you might be going for a technology or a approach that doesn't actually meet your standards.
Right.
So from that realm, I would absolutely give that advice. But in general, I think it comes back to process and having a technology that can feed the process that makes sense. Right. For example, we talked about know what you're looking for up front. If you define your criteria, you understand what success is and what you're looking for out of these candidates to be successful employees for your company and your team, then your technology should be able to bring that to the candidates in a fair way, like to a blind process, where they're evaluating objectively are the criteria that you've set. Right. If your process doesn't change and you stick with the I know it when I'll see it, no technology is going to make that better and pull the biases away. So I would say start with the process and what it is you want to objectively find, objectively achieve with your candidates, and then use technologies that are going to facilitate that interaction in the most fair way possible.
Right. And I like the point that you brought out there, Melissa, and I think it's been a theme just about in all your responses. It's process driven. Biases don't, walk away just because we're going to say no biases today. We're going to recruit totally fair today. No bias. It's all about the process. And training is so important. You've mentioned that too, getting everyone involved in the process, acknowledging that one, they have biases, just by virtue of being human, and two, that it takes a process to get that out, with the training. So it's not just, I'm not biased today. Okay. Tomorrow I'm a little bit biased and the next day I'm probably totally biased, but it's more of a process. And I like that point when you talk about the technology. The technology really is an extension of our process. It's integrated into our process. So if we take our biases with us on that particular day and then we program that into the technology or we include that into the process, we're not really getting it out. One of the things I've even used for my own self is I've added diversity to the process using technology. So, you've used computer-based testing, you'll do work simulations, you'll do work samples, as well. So really breaking up the process and adding different things in there that help to really eliminate, I'm going to say the human bias into the process, I've found really, really successful.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And there's technologies out there like ours where once you define what you're looking for, once you know what those objective criteria are, those soft skills or traits that you're measuring through assessments need to be, the scenarios, the work output, then you can put it through a system that's blind, which will allow us to remove the biases based on those trigger points, such as age, such as gender, because those aren't there. And we can now focus on, through the process that you're talking about, we can focus on which candidates meet our criteria and have the work output and have that creative or that problem solving or whatever it is we're looking for with those work samples, which ones will be the best fit for the job, for the team, for the company. And then select through that. But as you said, it all starts with understanding what you need first and then applying the right technologies to drive that in a fair way.
Awesome. And I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I was going to say, add to that, Aldeen, that you have to realize that from a technology perspective, any technology out there, companies are out there to solve problems, right? That's why technology exists. It's really just to solve problems. And in order to solve the problem, you have to first get to the root cause of the problem. Right. And some problems are a little more complex. It's kind of like an onion. It's in layers, right? And so you find that first layer. Well, why did that happen? You open the next layer. Well, why did that happen? There's another layer until you get to the core. And when you look at the problem of bias in hiring, so what's the problem? The problem is so-and-so has a bias against people who have gaps in their resume. Well, why do they have this? Why does it have that problem? That's part of the bias. But when you get down to the root cause, there's a trigger that causes that bias. That trigger is what they see on a resume. Blind hiring, you remove the trigger. You're afraid of lying. It's a bias. Remove the line, the fear's not there.
That's right.
It gets down to be as simple as that, really, to take care of and solve the problem.
And I have really bad news for anyone who's looking for technologies that are just going to take the problem away from them. That doesn't actually work. You don't buy a hammer and expect it to build you a house.
That's
Don't
right.
buy technology and expect it to fix all your problems.
No, that's so true. That's so true. And I wanted to, I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to segue and say that some companies, you know, they feel like, oh, you know, we'll deal with it. We've got our own method of handling the bias or, you know, engineering it out using the technology. But I think the statistics come back to us and it shows that we really don't have it figured out yet as companies. I'm looking at one stat here. I've got a couple of statistics from the company. One of the things they mentioned is that blind applications lead to 5 times more women being hired. And I'm going, you know, just looking at that was a survey they did in 2016, and they found that a woman would more likely to be hired about 46% of the time when it was blind. You know, so. Yeah. It really goes to show you that there is some, I'm going to say science behind the madness with blind hiring. Another one I have. Sorry, go ahead, Melissa.
You also brought up an amazing point about the data. So whatever solutions, whatever processes you do, make sure they're measurable. Because if you're going through and you're like, well, we've solved the problem, we're not biased anymore, there's just only white men available.
That's right. Where's the data to back that up?
Exactly. So when looking for solutions, it's critical to be able to watch the data from the first click on apply all the way through to the hire. What does that breakdown look like? Because the more you know about your candidates and how they're flowing through the process, the more you're able to pinpoint any of those particular issues. Because it could be a problem all the way back on the apply button. And maybe there's only one type of person who's clicking the apply. So there's your problem.
That's right.
Or it could be the interview questions all the way near the end, and suddenly all your women disappear.
That's right.
What exactly are we asking?
That's right.
So the data is critical to managing and perfecting a strong process.
And I want to say...
we have one...
Go ahead, Gabe.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. To round up this point, we do have one example. I can't share the name of the company. I'll say it's a Fortune 100 company, but the stats were so staggering. They hire engineers, and the top of the firing funnel, there is about 40% women in that funnel when they enter. At the end of the funnel, it's down to 5% women.
Wow.
And they have no visibility in that funnel. They know the bias is the part of the problem. But that's the stats they have. And without the visibility, it's very hard to fix the problem. But since they know really what it's about, that's why they do want to try blind hiring to really improve it. Because exactly right what you said is that when you turn things blind, the results are going to change. The results are going to change.
That's right. And I was actually, you know, that's a good point you mentioned, Gabe, because again, it goes back down to, like Melissa said, it's the data. And I know as an HR professional, sometimes, you know, we talk about data, we talk about analytics, we talk about how important it is to have the data, have that information to refer to. But some of the times it's gathering it, right? You're wearing so many hats, you've got so much going on that you don't have the time, one, to figure out what it is that you're looking for. So I'm going to paint you guys a picture. I'm sure you're familiar with it. But, you know, you've got, let's say, for example, a solo practitioner or maybe 2 or 3 people in an HR department. You've got a company of 100, 150 employees. You've got turnover. You've got lower level roles, higher level roles. You know, how much time is being spent in the hiring process to understand each touch point and collect data, you know, to provide that kind of analytical feedback that will actually show you what points in your process are really, you know, causing you to lose great candidates. You know, at what point are you putting the biases in? So for me, I think, you know, I go, okay, if you've got a lot going on, especially as a professional, how do you go about putting those things in place, I'm going to say, to get the data, get the feedback, you know, in the right hands in a format that's easy to understand, easy to use, and easy to gather.
And this is where the tools really can shine. And when you're looking at solutions and what is feeding that process, like at Career.Place, what we did, we spent a ton of time on that data and being able to show at each step what that demographic breakdown looks like, because it's all about enabling action. actionable insights that turn into better results.
That's right.
So there are tools and technologies out there where that is built in, and that should be a core requirement, because you can't go around and asking everybody for every piece of data at every step. You need your solution to do that for you.
Exactly. You either go from having no data to too much data, so now you've got data overload in just one part of your process. Right? Hiring part. Not even onboarding and performance managing, just so much data stuck in the hiring process.
True.
So I want to turn our focus a little bit to our candidate listeners. So what are some of your suggestions? I'm going to throw it out to both Gabe and Melissa. I'll get your feedback and then I'll weigh in on it. How do you think candidates can actually reduce bias against them?
Tough one.
All right, do you want me to go first? I can go first.
You go first.
Awesome. So working with, professionals, through career coaching and even just with colleagues too, as we go through our resumes and the hiring process, one of the first things, we've thought about was, aligning and reviewing your resume. A lot of people, like you mentioned in the first part of this conversation, Gabe, just the name, they go, oh my goodness, this person is, Hispanic, or they're Chinese, or, from the name, they make an assumption or they have a bias. While I'm not recommending you change your name for your resume, one of the things you want to do as a candidate is recognize that biases exist and then look at your resume through the eyes of the employer. Put yourself in their shoes and imagine what they would see when they look at your resume, and try your best to align your resume to the core requirements of the job. So demonstrating your value and your alignment to what they're looking for, as opposed to trying to play on, I'm going to say, another bias. Maybe you're trying to play on the fact that you went to the same college as they did, or you played the same sport that they're interested in. But, trying to focus more objectively on how accurately you match what they're looking for, I think is a great way to start to reduce that bias from a candidate perspective.
Yeah.
There's also, I think, a sense of balance.
Yeah.
So, and this is something that I've struggled with throughout my career, because it's such a weird question. How me should I be?
Yes.
Because on the one hand, I want to be embraced and celebrated for who I am. I don't want to go to work every day pretending I'm someone I'm not. And no one should ever have to be in that position. You will not be happy. So if you feel like you need to hide every aspect of yourself to get the job, that company doesn't deserve you. And that's the mentality I think people need to embrace. On the other hand, there's also the sense of how me should I be to be professional versus your personal life. For example, you're probably different when you're talking to your mother versus your best friend. There's probably just the cadence, the language you use, the stories you might tell.
That's right.
So it's the same thing when you present yourself for interviews and when you're evaluating a company. There is a part of you that's still you, and you need to be comfortable and proud of who you are. But that's also appropriate for that environment, and that fits with that. Just like when you modify your behavior in front of your child versus your parent versus your friend.
That's right. And I know I'm probably going to sound a little bit contradictory here, but people still hire for fit. And I mean, while we talk about diversity and inclusion, there's still, like you just mentioned, Melissa, we want you to be you, because you being you and not trying to be like Tom over here is diversity. But we also want to look for fit, because if Melissa's Melissa and Tom is Tom, can Melissa and Tom's personality work together on the same team to achieve a common goal? So
I really hope so, because Tom is my husband.
The irony of picking that name.
Yeah.
So being able to balance between objectivity as well as finding, like you said, that balance with a company fit, where it's a little bit, I'm going to say it's a little gray between not so much of a bias, but, more of wanting to, have cohesion and synergy. It's definitely a difficult goal, but it can be done, because I've seen it done successfully too. But you want to just be cognizant of both of those, that your objective as a candidate, making sure that your resume matches what the job description is asking you for. And then you're also being, a little bit more, I'm going to say, in tune with the company, the fit, the culture, what's going on there on the more human, on the softer side, to make sure that you're a fit for both sides.
Yeah, and I would also, just adding to that a little bit, sorry, Gabe, real quick.
Okay.
But adding to that a little bit, it's in addition to culture fit, it's really this concept of culture add. So you don't want to mimic who you're interacting with. You don't, as you said, don't want to be like Tom.
That's right.
But being able to add to that conversation, to add that next level, that facet, get people excited about the new ideas that you bring throughout the conversation. Because then what they're going to see is not, oh, well, we already have these ideas in these two other people who are on the team. They're going to see what different ideas and thoughts that you bring to the team, and that's going to enrich everybody. And that can get an infectious excitement.
Absolutely.
I like the fact that you mentioned culture add. Sorry, Gabe, we're cutting you off here.
Oh, cut me off, it's okay.
The women are a little biased. You know, I love that you mentioned the culture add, because the buzzwords have all been about culture fit and people fitting in and, you know, blending in, creating synergy. But sometimes it's an addition. It's not always trying to be, you know, homogenous and trying to create similarities. Sometimes it's really creating something that, you know what, we just tack that on there. It's an addition to our culture. It makes us even better.
Exactly.
I like to say it's what you can bring to the table. And that's the key thing, right? I mean, we're here to support a business. And what can you, as a person can bring to the table? We need it, right? And then that's really the thinking in terms of, I like to think about culture add as well, because you're adding that to your table effectively.
Right. That's right. No, I definitely agree with you there, Gabe. And the last question before we go to our first break here, how do you really humanize the hiring process while you're managing the bias at the same time? We touched a little bit on it when we were talking about how the candidates can balance between, you know, making sure they're fit for the job, but also a culture fit. But what are some of your recommendations to HR professionals, specifically talent acquisition professionals, looking at, you know, humanizing the hiring process? What are your recommendations for balancing that and bias at the same time?
I think one of the first things, just at the very initial experience, first impression, if you've got the easy button for the candidates, you're basically showing exactly how much you care about the candidates. So if it takes one click to apply and you go into some black hole, ether, whatever terminology you want to use that's out there, and you're kind of click and pray type of scenario, it doesn't convey that I care about you.
Right.
It conveys you are a submission.
Yes.
And so all the way back to the beginning, and I know it's ironic because the way that we see it is if you make the process blind, but you also make it much more engaging, asking the questions, probing what it is that you want to know, they're seeing that you care. They're seeing what you care about. And that's far more engaging than press this button 200 times for 200 jobs and hope somebody notices.
Right.
Yeah. I think another thing that's becoming so critical today, and I see more and more people using it from a hiring perspective, make use of videos. Videos are so powerful from your culture statement, but you know what? Go one step further. Have the hiring manager with his smartphone record him or herself talking about the job. Right? A candidate would just go so much further from a candidate perspective to see the person who's going to be potentially hiring you and have them talk through that job. Have team members join that video as well. It doesn't have to be a whole big 20-minute production. It could be a 2-minute thing. Even describe the job a little bit to them. I think that would be such a great. I've seen people do it, and I think it's an important thing. I think that practice has to expand.
Yeah, I like that.
Stop telling me what I do for a living. You know, if you're posting for, let's say, an engineer or salesperson or marketing person, chances are really good that unless it's entry level, they kind of get what the job is. They've been doing it. So instead of spending 90% of your job post describing what they do for a living, spend it telling them why they really want to do it for you.
That's right. I want to scream amen here, Melissa, because to your point, unless you've got some kind of very, highly sophisticated job that's, only been around since yesterday, where people don't know what it is, chances are people know what you're required to do, but they want to know why they want to work there, why they should come to work for you, like you said. What makes your company different from the 10 other companies, your 10 other competitors that's doing it the same, pretty much probably the same way. You know, why should they choose you as opposed to the others? Those are some really great points. The one I would add is that create diversity goals. So we've got HR goals, we've got, you know, goals for marketing, goals for everything. But diversity, I find, usually they're like, it will happen. You know, we'll hire a black person, you know, if they're the best candidate in there, or we'll hire a woman if she's the best one we've seen. So creating a goal, you know, where you say, you know what, I want to, and I don't want to go off on a tangent saying now we're going to create 2% of this, 5% of that, but creating a goal where you create a process that really facilitates diversity and encourages diversity.
Exactly.
I think is really, that should really be the goal. Not I should have 2% of my population, or, you know, my population in my company should be similar to the population that I have around me. But it more should be reflective of creating a process that limits biases, you know, allowing more people of different, you know, backgrounds, to participate in the process and still feel, you know, a part of the team.
Yeah. I like to say that blind hiring is not going to guarantee you 5 women, 3 Asians, and so forth.
That's right.
Promote diversity. And I like to use the term promote diversity, but that's really what it's about when you put these practices and these techniques all together.
That's right.
Especially if you combine it with trainings, especially if you combine it with the idea of culture add and not culture fit, and start shifting some of the ways that you judge individuals, because that alone, as you start moving away from I'm looking for another me, start moving towards I'm looking for somebody who's going to enrich my team and my company, will also, it all kind of combines together to promote a lot more of a diverse workforce.
Totally agree with that, Melissa. And on that note, we're going to take our first break. This is HR and Career with AldeenST. We'll be right back after this short break.
Are you stuck in a job you don't like and can't get out? Are you returning to the workforce and feeling scared, unprepared, and lost? Are you struggling with your job search? You are not alone. Many people work with a coach to use proven strategies to help them take charge and navigate their job search and career development. Learn more at AldeenST.com or email AldeenST@gmail.com to set up your first discovery session.
See the difference an HR business partner can make in your business. Let us show you how a strong, strategic, and aligned human resource strategy can help you reduce costs, improve productivity, and help you retain your competitive advantage. Make your human resources strategy part of your business strategy to drive real business results. Let us show you how at AldeenST.com or at AldeenST@gmail.com. Aldeen Simmonds Thorpe Consulting, transforming your business with the power of people.
Boost your job search with a masterclass. Learn how to optimize your efforts, use multiple strategies, and get hired faster through our Job Seeker Masterclasses. Learn how to craft an outstanding resume, network yourself into a job, and interview like a pro. Join a class today at AldeenST.com. Optimize your job search and get hired faster.
Welcome back to HR and Career with AldeenST. I'm your host, AldeenST. Today I have two guests with me from Career Place. I've got Gabe Gurman and Melissa Dobbin, and today we're talking about recruitment bias control, managing bias in our recruitment or hiring process. We've been having a really great discussion so far talking about how biases exist in the hiring process, how we can, for want of a better term, engineer it out. And now we're going to go into one of my favorite segments, which is truth or myth. So I've got a few of them here, and I know we'll probably have to go between Gabe and Melissa here. So the first one I want to touch on is there's a criticality of culture fit. Is that a truth or a myth?
Take it, Melissa.
Are you going to... Oh, me? I was going to say, call out a name. To the points that we were talking about earlier, it's a myth. It's all about culture add. If we go into culture fit, then we're going to find a lot of people that are just like us, which goes into groupthink and goes away from both diversity and creative thinking and having different viewpoints that ultimately lead to a better decision. Because let's be honest, if there's a whole bunch of just yous looking at the same problem, every mistake will be replicated.
That's right. That's right. I totally agree with that. All right. My second one goes to Gabe. You can train away biases. Truth or myth?
And Gabe says it's a myth.
Of course it is.
You cannot just train away biases. We're born with biases. It's part of our psyche. And you can, but like we mentioned before, training is important. We said awareness is the first step to really understanding you have a problem over that, but we know we have to do additional things above and beyond that, coupled with that, to really, really take care of the problems with bias.
I totally agree. And I mean, we've got a fairly recent example in Starbucks in the media where they provide, I'm going to say, a plethora of training for their employees. But no matter how much training you get, if it doesn't start to, I'm going to say, be infused into culture and start expanding beyond the walls of just, here are the biases, here's what you do, here's how you avoid them, and you actually take it one step further and start to really evaluate how effective that training is happening, then you're really not going to have a great effect on training biases out. So definitely agree with you. That's a myth there, Gabe. My other one, truth or myth? I'm going to go with Melissa this time. AI will replace humans and therefore remove biases.
Absolutely. In maybe 1,000 or 2 years? I don't know. In the age of data and Isaac Asimov. No, it's a myth because AI, especially in how we use it in a lot of the tools in the HR world, they're algorithms. It's data that is evaluated through an equation that's created by a person. So equations are not critical thinkers. They cannot see what is different. They can't accommodate a gap that's because you can't do the job and a gap because you took care of a family matter. And so we need that human element. And there's just, we're not anywhere close to replacing that.
No. I agree. And I mean,
I like to say, Aldeen, on numbers, I have to, as someone who used to do research in AI many, many years ago, I like to say that from an HR perspective, AI will augment humans. It will never replace humans.
And I was going along that same tangent too there, Gabe, because a lot of people I know are fearing, oh my goodness, the machines are coming. They're going to be taking over what we do, how we do what we do. And it's a very important point to mention that they will never replace us. For some jobs.
Well, I've seen that movie, though.
Yeah, me too. I was just thinking about that as I was mentioning that point. We've seen that movie, but again, even with those movies, you've still seen where the human element is still required to maintain that balance. And as my personal view on technology is a tool. It is an add-on. It is a facilitator. It is not the person driving the process. So again, it comes back to you, the human, in the human resources department, making sure that you are utilizing that tool. Cause you made a very good point there, Melissa. AI is really just a combination of algorithms and programs that are, together creating a chain reaction or executing a process. Right? So you still need that human element that's going to be in there to, obviously remove a little bit of the bias, hopefully, but also to make sure that the process continues to exist and facilitate humans. My other one.
There are some very powerful tools out there.
Yes.
But we are the wielders of the tools.
That's true.
That's
we are
the key
swordsmen.
thing. Yeah.
We are the swordsmen.
Right.
There you go. My other one, I'm going to put this one to Gabe this time. While interviewing, just be yourself.
Oh, see, everyone would want to say, I'm going to call that a myth.
Really?
And here's why.
Yes.
Hold on a second. What the discussion we had earlier.
Yeah.
If I change the question a little bit, I'll call it the truth.
Okay.
Be your professional self. And that's an important distinction.
Yes.
Be your professional self, not the self that you're in front of your friends or in front of your family or in front of your kids or whatever. Be your professional self and make sure you put yourself in that mindset. And then I'll say that's the truth.
Right. I definitely agree with you because, again, some people go, I'm going to be myself in the interview, but how much of that is really impacting the decision for the interview? You know what I mean? Like,
True.
you don't want it, like you said, you don't want to share everything. You just want to share enough to show them that you know what you're doing. Perfect.
Exactly.
And the last one I have.
To an earlier, sorry, I can't pass this up. To an earlier analogy that you made, it's like a first date. You don't want to be completely somebody else because that makes the second date really exhausting.
It does.
But you also maybe don't want to let everything out.
True. It's a delicate, I like that analogy. You know, your interview is kind of like your first date. You don't want to give it all away, but you also want to show that you're here. You're here for that reason, you know. That's a good point, Melissa. Really good point. The last one I want to bring up is I know what my unconscious biases are, so I don't need a structured hiring process. Truth or myth? And I'll leave this one open. Truth or myth?
Myth!
Big time myth.
Myth. Well, first of all, you said, I know what my unconscious biases are.
Yeah.
So wouldn't that make them conscious?
I know! I was hoping that would get past you, but didn't.
No. Big time myth.
So
and to make it even worse, even when you know your conscious biases, training's not going to be enough.
No.
Right.
You know, I'll just take a simple one. Driving, for example. You know, a lot of people go through driver's ed, they go through defensive driving, but just because you've gone through all that training doesn't always make you a better driver. So, and that's more skill than it is anything unconscious or even, you know, personal. So
exactly.
I think, to your point, training is a part of you know, making sure that you understand what your biases are, you identify what they are, and learn how to manage them so that they don't negatively impact the process. But definitely, you still need to structure your hiring process. If not for anything, at least for the data and consistency out of it, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Perfect.
And having the transparency. Yep.
Nope. That's also very important. So on that note, we're going to take our last break. We'll be right back.
Are you stuck in a job you don't like and can't get out? Are you returning to the workforce and feeling scared, unprepared, and lost? Are you struggling with your job search? You are not alone. Many people work with a coach to use proven strategies to help them take charge and navigate their job search and career development. Learn more at AldeenST.com or email AldeenST@gmail.com to set up your first discovery session.
See the difference an HR business partner can make in your business. Let us show you how a strong, strategic, and aligned human resource strategy can help you reduce costs, improve productivity, and help you retain your competitive advantage. Make your human resources strategy part of your business strategy to drive real business results. Let us show you how at AldeenST.com or at AldeenST@gmail.com. Aldeen Simmonds Thorpe Consulting, transforming your business with the power of people.
Boost your job search with a masterclass. Learn how to optimize your efforts, use multiple strategies, and get hired faster through our job seeker masterclasses. Learn how to craft an outstanding resume, network yourself into a job, and interview like a pro. Join a class today at AldeenST.com. Optimize your job search and get hired faster.
Welcome back to HR and Career with AldeenST. I'm your host, AldeenST. I've been having a really great time here with Gabe and Melissa from Career Place. We've been talking about recruitment, bias control, how we identify our biases, what we can do to eliminate them out of the hiring process, or at least manage them. We've talked a lot about that. We've even gone into some truth and myth. And for the last piece here, I'm going to ask both of them one at a time. I'm going to ask for their best piece of advice for our listeners. So I'm going to start with the lady first. I'm going to be a little biased, and I'm going to go with Melissa. What are some of your recommendations for best practices for our listeners right now?
Well, I think there's two sides of that, because we've been having two parts of the conversation.
That's right.
The employer side and the hiring managers, and then the applicant side.
That's right.
And from the applicant side, I think, that combination of be your best professional self, but also be very honest with yourself. What is it that you want in a job when you're going for a job? Because that comes through. Your passion, your devotion, or your disinterest comes through. So be honest with yourself. And you know what? It's okay to walk away because a culture or company is not right for you. You're interviewing them just like they're interviewing you, and they need to deserve you just as much. So when you come in with that, this is what I want, and this is why, and this is what I expect in return, then that confidence, that dedication comes through, and you're going to find the type of job that fits for you, and that's the type of job you're going to be successful in.
I love that, Melissa.
So, and then for the employer side, for those who are interviewing, whether they're the recruiters or talent acquisition or the hiring managers, first of all, you're biased. I'm sorry you are. We all are. So the more that you have a sense of, not I know it when I'll see it, but this objective goal is what I need, the better the experience is going to be. You're going to find people that meet your needs a lot easier, and you're going to be doing it in a much more objective way. And on top of that, when you find yourself jumping to a conclusion because of maybe the way someone speaks, their cadence, they don't find your jokes funny, that one drives me nuts. I like it when people laugh at my jokes. Get behind that. Make sure what you are dismissing or what you're judging is what you intend to judge. And just that awareness, it's not going to work 100% of the time, but it will make a big difference. So being objective and being aware and knowing what you're looking for up front and not just assuming you'll see it, that's all going to make a huge difference in finding the right talent that's going to augment your team.
Right. I like that. I really like that, Melissa. Yeah. Gabe, you're going to have a tough act to follow. I'm biased to the...
Oh, I know. I always do. But my contribution for best practice is really just to think about, when you think about compliance and diversity, and I talk about diversity a lot, but you can't think about quotas. It's not about the quota.
That's right.
It's all around being consistent and fair to all of your candidates. That's the key, right? And that's the key to make sure you're focusing on the value of what the candidates are bringing to the table. And by being consistent and fair to all of them, naturally, you're going to see, diversity being promoted through the process. And I think that's one of the key things. Think of consistency and fairness to each and every candidate who's applying to the job.
That's right. I love those last words. I there's nothing I'm going to say to follow those. I'm going to be biased in those two responses and not even go for it. Well, thank you so much, Gabe and Melissa, for joining me. And thank you.
Thank you. It was great being here.
Yes, it was great to have you.
What he said.
Perfect. Well, thank you to our listeners for joining us again for another episode of HR and Career with AldeenST. Join us again next time as we dive into the many facets of human resources and career development, providing you with practical and useful tips you can use to move you forward. See you next time.